But we are ready to go for our next session, so let's get started. So we're having, this session is a fireside chat around SAP Business Process Intelligence. I introduce you to Sanjeev, who's from the innovation team, and Guru from JP Morgan, who's on the big screen with us via video. So welcome, gentlemen, and over to you. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here today. I know we've got the anchor leg, so hopefully you've had some coffee and the energy is up. We've had quite an enlightening couple of days. I think you'll agree. My thanks to SAP and Pioneer for a job well done. I really enjoyed it, and it's great to be in person. Frankly, it's. The travel was quite a feat, but it's really nice to see everyone in person. We've covered a lot of ground already today, or through the sessions. Falcon Tony's vision for SAP Pioneer, Brett King's vision for the next 30 years, FinTech to TechFin. So we're going to try to sort of interleave between those things. My colleague Guru and I have the task of bringing to life how SAP BPI, which I don't think we've talked a lot about, is such a critical part of SAP RISE and is enabling continuous transformation and agility in core processing for banks. Today, you should get an intimate discussion between two seasoned practitioners for SAP BPI. We're going to cover 4 questions. What was our primary motivation for SAP BPI using it? How did SAP BPI fit into our operations and digital transformation strategies? How well did our implementations of SAP BPI go, and what lessons were learned? Were our expectations met? What are our aspirations on the go forward? How do we think SAP BPI fits into our ecosystem, our transformation ecosystem? And how do we see the transformation design space evolving? So if we get through all of that, I think it'll be great. If you guys want to break in with questions, it's an intimate group here. I'd be happy to. I'm sure Guru would be too, to do that. So let's get started. Guru, could you start us off by giving us context on your experience with SAP BPI?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sanjeev. Very excited to be here. Amsterdam is definitely one of my favorite places, so wish I was there in person for sure. I think, just in terms of quick introduction, right, I'm over at JP Morgan Chase in the Asset and Wealth Management Division, where I run a process engineering center of excellence that covers many things across process improvement and automation. And with respect to my experiences in SAP BPI, I think it's been somewhat of a long journey. I think, in my prior roles, it started at Goldman Sachs, where we were one of the early adopters. When the tool was called Signavio, and we started there with everything from mapping to quickly becoming a foundation for a lot of things we do from a change perspective. Since then, expanded into a bit of automation of business rules and decisions, and then eventually went over to Deloitte in a bit of a consulting capacity, Sanjeev, with you, to drive some of that in that strategy for other banks in the Americas, with some pretty cool results and implementation. So very happy and excited to talk to you all about some of the experiences and how things are interweaving into the banking space today. I'll flip it back to you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Guru. So some quick context on my experience. Clearly, Guru and I have worked together for a long time. I was at Goldman Sachs. I was responsible for their industrialization transformation. That's really their global ops transformation, within which design mindset or the notion of having it became very, very central. And Signavio, as it was back then, became a centerpiece. In fact, I think we were one of the first large enterprise customers for Signavio, and it's amazing to see their journey. And congratulations at arriving at SAP BPI. At Deloitte, I ran the operations transformation team for banking capital markets, and helped co-found the Global Center for Process Bionics. I've been an independent advisor to Signavio since my retirement from Deloitte. I've helped them with their FSI and North America strategy. And most recently, I am the chief business officer at a small, fast-growing AI and data firm that's focused on the integration of AI and machine learning to process automation, and the exciting topic of digital twins, which is also central, and in which SAP BPI is also very central. So that's the context on who you have in front of you. We're going to start with the questions, Guru. So question one, what was our primary motivation for using SAP BPI? How did SAP BPI fit into our operations and digital transformation strategies? Guru, if you want to get us off on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just start us off just, from the context of my current seat, which is in asset and wealth management at JP Morgan. We're not the only ones using SAP BPI here. There's, lots of other groups in different parts of the journey. But I think it's been really interesting here, especially in the wealth space, because historically there's been a lot of underinvestment in, sort of technological changes in these organizations, because the profit margins were quite high, and usually the answer to more volume is just, hey, we're going to just add more people to support the process. And I think that's kind of worked well for some period of time until recently. I think as the margins are starting to come down, as well as a lot more younger people kind of getting into the wealth management space, we're seeing a lot of increase in volumes as well. So I think here we've had SAP BPI for over the last 4 years or so, and a lot of the motivation for bringing that in was as part and parcel of a large-scale transformation initiative to really change the way we do pretty much our processes and everything here, right? So, and SAP BPI is really a key piece of that puzzle. We envision it, and it is kind of serving as a foundation to many of those change initiatives, along with many other automation technologies, including workflow, robotic process automation, data, and other things. So, I would say it kind of goes part and parcel with a lot of these sort of new generation capabilities. Maybe not as new, but I think banking tends to be a little bit on the slower on the adoption on some of this, and it is very much part and parcel of that, and we see it very much as the foundation to driving many of these changes for a lot of what is still a manual sort of world in the banking side, that's across a lot of people, across a lot of processes that are more or less bespoke. I don't know, Sanjeev, what's your kind of view in terms of the motivations?
No, it's we're off to a good start there. We talked a little bit earlier here actually, and I heard several speakers touch on this, which is the front end of the banking has seen a lot of change and a lot of automation and some true disruption. But the middle and back, frankly, is lagging, and that's where a lot of the opportunity is. And that's the story I think you're telling, Guru, and the story we had at Goldman, where this notion of design mindset became very fundamental to our transformation for scalability and efficiency, as we contended with the commoditization of capital markets. And really underlying that was, how do we make sure that the business was still capable of expressing its intention on how things should work? That was sort of lost, in all the, incessant change and the different systems and the different integrations, the legacy, the mergers and so on. Not that Goldman had a lot of mergers, but I've seen it elsewhere. And how do you break away from this game of marginally fixing things? Just making little changes and compromises to get to what you need done. And our aspiration was to make process and decision design core to every operations analyst job, and change the operations analyst job from looking down to looking up and being a fuller partner to technology, and frankly having the lines between operations technology blur. Very, right next to that was this notion of cost of change, which we again touched on, and other speakers touched on it. We certainly want to eliminate all the manual labor. Guru's on that mission at JPM. The reality is you're not going to do that completely for a very, very long time. And if you look at what's going on in operations as it does automate, you find that something like over 50% of operational costs are not manual processing, but are actually cost of change, meaning cost of participating in large transformation programs or change controls, or risk and control activity, audit, regulatory activity. And if you dig underneath that, you find out that requirements and testing are consuming something like 75% of our software development time on aggregate. So how do you really attack that? Because if you attack that, you get that efficiency, you get that scalability, and how do you really challenge the operating model between ops and tech? And SAP BPI Signavio has been very, very fundamental to that. I think, Guru, you're going to spend a little bit of time on that in a second. At the same time, not ignoring risk and control transformation. Risk and control has been felt like a tax that just has to be there, and you keep piling people onto it. It doesn't matter what it takes, you have to be compliant. The reality is you can go after that, and SAP BPI Signavio has really helped make a big dent there. So moving from detective to preventive controls, linking policies and procedures to design models, capturing leading and lagging risk indicators using the metadata capabilities. Last but not the least is focusing on agility. That's something else we've talked a lot about at this conference. How do you get humans in different organizations to collaborate on design? Because that really is the part that slows transformation down. Technology proliferates, innovation is out there, but how do you get everyone to agree on what to do and do it well simultaneously? How do you use things like simulations for UAT? How do you do more model-driven development? So, those were our motivations at GS. Guru, I'm going to take us to the next question. How well did your implementation of SAP BPI meet your expectations, and what lessons did you learn?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think Sanjeev, just echoing many of the things that you kind of said, right? I think here we started with bringing in SAP BPI to really establish a common understanding of how our processes are being done with the process mapping module. If you imagine a world where everyone's really using PowerPoints, paper, Visio to map out how they do things in lots of different ways, we wanted to kind of get some consistency and then actually use that to drive some of that change. So that's kind of how we started off. I think when we look at how. That really kind of ties in with what was our expectations and how are we sort of achieving that today. So location strategies is a big one. We move a lot of processes to different locations to support different models. Having a prerequisite of getting everything mapped out before we move it in a consistent way is very important, and improving that process. We do procedure generation. As you said, we do simulation. We do tons of automation initiatives with robotic process and workflow. All of those have a hard prerequisite of getting things mapped out here in a consistent way and to drive that implementation. So from that perspective, I would say, the expectations of what we brought the tool in, which is really to support our change transformation agenda, is very much underway. I think in addition, we've done some interesting things like taking, the inventory of technology systems, taking the various, data models within those systems and have linked them up into Signavio. So as people are mapping and modeling things, there's sort of one source of truth that, traverses across all of these sort of knowledge sources. So that's also brought us some interesting, interesting features there. And then, when we talk about things like agility and model-driven development, I think we see this more, very much in the decision automation space, where we actually go in, write the business rules in Signavio, export out the code, and then, put that right into our engines to execute them. where typically, there would be a long cycle for doing that sort of iteration. Somebody can write and change that, many, many times over in the course of a day. So tremendous agility, we've been able to achieve. And I think it, again, kind of goes to the vision and the transformation agenda that we got going on, and how this product is sort of, right, helping to contribute to that journey for us. So that's interesting. And I think, with respect to, lessons learned, I think not necessarily from here, but more holistically, what I would say is, kind of being on this journey a few times, I think, and something that we've tried to get right here is to really consider the scale in which we're going to be using this product, right, in the transformation agenda, and properly establishing processes, governance to really achieve that scale, and not have the scale overgrow those sort of processes, and really to support that, establishing some key centers of excellence to drive those processes, to establish a community of practice, and really make sure that this thing is growing and maturing in the right way. So I think it's been an interesting journey, and I think definitely some interesting lessons learned there as well.
No, thank you, Guru. I think underneath all of this, you'll hear that, as with all transformations, organizational behavior change is at the heart of the success of it. So, to add to what Guru said, first of all, I think the SAP BPI implementation is very successful. Frankly, I wouldn't be here and allowed to speak if it wasn't successful. So, there's almost a prerequisite. But if I think about what Signavio did for us, it was really about winning over hearts and minds. It's just about everyone from any part of the organization, whether it was compliance or risk or ops or tech, they loved the user interface and the simplicity of the tool. So we didn't have to force fit it in. We didn't have to displace ways of doing work. You could walk around at Goldman Sachs and you'd see maybe a third of the operations desktops open with Signavio on it because they were living in the tool. And in that, it enabled collaboration. People started to use it as a point of communicating, everything associated with change and also how things were being done, the risk and control on it. So, it became very, very central and won those hearts and minds. In all of this, were there tangible results? And I can tell you categorically there were. And, Guru, you can maybe when you're answering your next question, elaborate a little bit, but we're not talking about 5% efficiencies, 10% efficiencies. We've seen, things achieve 30, 40, in some cases 50% efficiencies in a very short amount of time because you were able to implement a completely different change process, a much better control over design, and a much more collaborative dialogue. Not to mention a very strong commingling of the ops and tech roles in a positive way. Some clear lessons learned, though, is don't think of it just as a tool implementation. Think about it as capability development, so it's skills, tools, governance, methods, standards. And that is, frankly, what Guru is doing at JPM so well. And while you're at it, challenge your roles and responsibilities. You're going to find people can and will do and want to do different things, and playing a design role is critical, and you can do it without, compromising risk and control. Good, we're about, 6 or 7 minutes from time. I'm going to ask the third question, and we may blend the fourth one in here. What are your aspirations for SAP BPI moving forward, and how does SAP BPI fit into your ecosystem that you're developing for transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to touch on the point you mentioned before with respect to, results and tangible results, I think we've seen, plenty of that in our implementation here as well. I would say that, certainly just by mapping and getting some transparency and consistent view of the process for all parties involved, that tends to give a bit of a general uplift, in your change programs. I would say probably something in the magnitude of, 5 to 10%. Then coupled by process improvement, you get a lot. But I think where we see a lot, as you said, is when we actually take these assets and use it to drive implementation, where we've seen 30-40%. To just name a couple of the large scale programs we're doing, we're automating how we write mortgages, in Americas through this tool, right? We are automating how we, invest cash automatically for clients. So these are sort of some large scale things and require some very complicated rules to be written and executed. And using the model-driven approach and SAP BPI, we've been able to see some significant wins there. I think, coming to your question on aspirations for SAP BPI, as you rightly mentioned, right? I think automation is, large-scale automation is coming, but I think, we're going to be living in this interim state for quite some time. And in that world, we definitely see, right, most of our workforce being trained on being literate in the tool. We kind of want to see this in the desktops, similar to a Microsoft Word or an Office, Excel, where everyone is using this to map out their processes as a common language of how to communicate processes. We see a few, 100 people just in my operations organization that would be building and, implementing these sort of workflows and decision automations using these sort of tools. And I think, we want to enhance, right? We want to do some pretty cool things where we, further integrate the tool into our ecosystem, so our execution systems can pick off these models right from SAP BPI without even an intermediary there. I think, when I also just adding a little bit of color on what's so interesting and, where this kind of goes is I see the model-driven aspect of it really taking on a lot more in the coming years, and that being the primary method. I think, things like the low-code aspect of things as they start to evolve in this methodology, I think is going to completely disrupt, right? Even how we do just implementations and how we do agile in general. And then, of course, very excited to kind of explore some of the other cooler stuff like AI ML in tandem with declarative stuff. So I see, lots of aspirations in terms of how we are using this with respect to our talent, our people, but as well as integration with other capabilities and taking those things to the next level to support our transformation agenda as well.
Thanks, Guru. We could go on for a while, as you can tell. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. First of all, my personal aspiration for SAP BPI is to see it as a change console or a cockpit for an enterprise. There's an enormous value to bring together all the change, everything from changing the customer journey, the customer experience, to the back-end processing, to really understanding how ERP systems fit in, but bringing it together in one place so that change dialogue can be coordinated and run in a tighter loop, with good telemetry and feedback. That is the connected ecosystem that I think we're moving to, and I think that's a lot of what Guru, you've been referencing. I'd add one more thing. We are excited to be involved in digital twin work now, in my latest guys with Cambridge. And we see SAP BPI playing a central role in that world, serving as a general purpose process digital twin framework that would integrate everything from emulation of current processes using the process intelligence capability, the what-if analysis using simulation, and a full feedback loop into model-driven development and low-code, no-code. We have some very early successes there, but a lot more to come. So, those are the aspirations. Good, I'm going to try to move us along. If you would do two things, answer question 4 and do your wrap-up at the same time. How do you see the business design space evolving in 3 to 5 years? And what are your concluding thoughts on SAP BPI?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, Sanjeev. I think, as I, previously touched on, in terms of like things like model-driven development, I think I really see it sort of transforming the way we do the work. Some of these intersections with these new and upcoming capabilities also sort of provide a lot of interesting ways in which we can do this. I think one key area is like, for example, process mining, which, we are starting to see a lot more in the financial services and the banking world, where we're actually interrogating, right, process data on an ongoing basis, and then actually, looping that back into the actual processes to, make some real-time changes or to drive some real-time processes. So again, it's like a next level of intelligence when you can map your process, have the process execute, see how it compares to what you mapped out, and then it really affect, right, how you execute the process on a day-to-day basis. So very exciting in terms of the landscape. I'll just, in the interest of time, wrap up by saying that, again, it's been a 3 to 4 year journey for us so far here for Sap Bpi, and it's absolutely traversed, everything that we do from a change perspective in so many ways. From just being an anchor of a foundation to driving that to actually being part of many of those transformations and automations using model-driven capability. I see, a lot of potential for, this to continue to grow even further and really become, really woven into the DNA of the organization, and do some pretty interesting and fantastic things. So. Looking forward to that, and it's an absolute pleasure. I'll flip it back to you, Sanjeev.
Thank you. I'm going to just say a couple of quick things to wrap it up. I think as we move into a world of model-driven development and low-code, no-code increasingly, the primary task in technology development is going to become design. And so, if you think we're moving from fintech to tech fin, and everyone in FSI is going to become a technologist, actually you're going to become a designer. And finally, I see a colleague from Northwestern that we were, talking earlier, having done a lot of work in the transaction banking space. The one thing that strikes me is that we're moving into a world of orchestration and microservices. The world changes too fast to create monolithic structures, and the ability to do that rapid transformation and go from design to execute and changing the client experience is a lot of what Sap Bpi can help with. And you talked eloquently about how it's changing, making the client experience bespoke because it's self-service. Well, I think that's really what's coming. So with that, I'm going to end it. Thank you very much for your attention. Hope you have a great trip and safe travels back.
Do we have any questions? I didn't have any questions on. Anybody have any questions for Sanjeev or Guru? No, I'm an ops person at heart, so I love to hear all of this stuff. And it's fantastic to see how you've been able to not just leverage the tool, but win the hearts and minds of people to be able to really embrace the technology and be able to embrace change and innovation. I think that's fantastic. So well done, you. Well done.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.